the Michigan Department of Health, again, under the Snyder administration, presumably the governor oversaw and is responsible for his departments. Dr. Eden Wells became Michigan's chief medical executive in May 2015. By then, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services had been aware for at least 7 months of a significant increase in the deadly waterborne Legionnaire's disease throughout Flint. And we previously talked to you about what Legionnaire's is. But when investigators obtained access to Wells' phones, they discovered something unusual. Quote, for Dr. Wells' phone, the earliest message is from November 12th, 2015. Then Flint Special Prosecutor Todd Flood wrote in a subpoena petition obtained by The Intercept. During the key period that investigators were probing, no messages were found. And this goes on to talk about that she was charged, Dr. Eden Wells was charged for involuntary manslaughter for her role in the water crisis. Other searches turned up similar results. The phone of Tim Becker, MDHHS's, so the health department's chief deputy director, had no messages on it prior to April 2016. So that's beyond just the 2014 to 2015 period that Flint used the Flint River. His messages mysteriously disappeared all the way up to January 20. Oh, excuse me, January. April 2016. Becker testified to having first asked questions about Flint's Legionella outbreak in January 2015. Well, how do we know that testimony is true if we don't have access to any of his messages? Moving on, Patricia McCain, an epidemiologist with the health department, who testified she was pressured to lie by Dr. Eden Wells about elevated blood lead levels in Flint's children. Imagine that. The chief medical executive was pressuring epidemiologists to fudge the numbers, hide the numbers of children's elevated blood levels. McCain's phone only had 4 text messages on her phone from 2015 and 7 messages total. Fellow epidemiologist Sarah Lyon Callow, she was the director of the state's Bureau of Epidemiology and Population Health. There was no messages prior to June 2016 on her phone. Quote, again, for some strange reason, the earliest text message in time on her device begins June 20th, 2016. Wesley Priam, manager of the state health department's Lead and Healthy Homes program. So there was a lead crisis. He's the manager of the Lead and Healthy Homes program. No messages on his phone. Oh, excuse me. 1 text messages found on his phone from January 22nd, 2016. So you might be wondering, all right, who are these officials? Why do these time periods matter? Imagine for a second if the corporate media caught wind of, Trump doesn't really put anything right in, but let's say Trump's chief of staff, Trump's health department advisors, key health officials in the Trump administration. Imagine if the corporate media caught wind that all of their messages from January 2020, February 2020, March 2020 didn't exist. Emails were deleted, phone calls, text messages were deleted. No communication existed prior to when news of the coronavirus came out. Can you imagine? Rightly so, by the way. It would be wall-to-wall coverage on every station, every outlet. This is a cover-up. They deleted their emails. They deleted their text messages. This is basically the same thing, only 5 or 6 years earlier. Not a deadly airborne illness, but a deadly waterborne illness. And later on, lead contamination, lead poisoning. That's what we're talking about here. Like, they basically deleted the evidence. As a journalist, I'll say potential evidence, because you always want to be fair. But I don't know. Jen, if I'm not trying to hide something, I generally don't delete all my text messages or erase my phone from the key period that Flint used the Flint River.
Right. And certainly multiple people, wouldn't do that. Maybe you could say like, okay, this one person like regularly, clears her messages out or whatever. Which shouldn't happen, by the way, because they work for the government and it's a government device. They're supposed to like retain those anyway. But even if you could argue that this many, no, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And not to mention that would need, I think you mentioned earlier, probably at the top of the show, that there was clear need to retain this information. There was litigation going on. So for it to be gone on multiple phones completely, it makes no sense.
It's not just the top health officials. One of Governor Snyder's top officials, his press secretary, her phone was deleted, erased, right when she left office in November 2015, a month and a half before a criminal investigation was launched. Why is this super important? Why is this super important? In fairness to her, the press secretary, she might have not committed any crimes, but the whole investigation, potential charges against a governor or anyone, is about, were they notified and when were they notified? Snyder told Congress he only learned of the Legionella outbreak in January 2016. Well, wouldn't it be important to be able to see his communications with his press secretary, whether it be the text messages, if there were any, or the phone log? Because it's not just the text messages, it's the phone history to see when were they talking on the phone. Was there rapid increases in their discussions on the phone? So all of these things are very important because that's one of Snyder's top officials who leaves pretty much right before a criminal investigation is launched. But there's more. On the lack of phone messages from top MDHHS officials, so health department officials, a department spokesperson told The Intercept via email, quote, "The department does not care to comment," other than to say that the department always cooperates with the Attorney General's office in providing anything that office has asked for during its Flint water investigation. Let me repeat that. The department does not care to comment when asked why were phones erased? Why were a year and a half's worth of text messages erased? We do not care to comment. Jen, I would never, ever borrow from George W. Bush. But in this case, I have to. That's about as close to a journalistic, we got him, as it gets. I mean, they're not even like, they're not declining comment, even though technically that is declining comment. Usually they say, we decline comment. They're not giving you spin or BS. They're just saying, yeah, we kind of don't want to talk about that.